Hi guys, it's Rory here. Just wanted to leave a quick note to say that if you enjoyed last week's episode and want to keep up to date with the content that we release every week, please remember to follow or subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or whichever platform you're listening to us on. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify specifically, please also remember to leave us a review. It means a lot to us and does wonders for pushing our podcast in front of new listeners every week. Once you've done that, leave a comment on Spotify or come and join us on X, BlueSky, or Instagram and let us know that you've left a review. Thank you once again for listening. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage Podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and I'm joined once again by Erik Stover.
Hi, Rory. Thanks for having me again.
It's a pleasure to have you back on, Erik. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm also joined for the first time by Dr. David Kilpatrick. David, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much, Rory. Enjoy listening. So it's a real extra pleasure to be on. Thanks.
That's really kind words. Thanks very much. People might remember Erik Stover from an episode that we had earlier in the year on North Jersey professional soccer and his plans to bring a football club to the historic Hinchliffe Stadium in North Jersey, which, as it turns out, is actually going to be the new New York Cosmos, as it was announced around a month, maybe 6 weeks or so ago now. Really kind of came out the blue. Some people might argue it's the worst kept secret. Some people might argue it was kept under lock and key for a very long time. But regardless, it's an incredibly historic occasion. I had no idea that this was the football club that Erik was planning to revive. So we are going to be talking everything about the New York Cosmos today. We're here with one of the leading historians on the New York Cosmos, and obviously Erik, the person who is going to be leading the new club into the USL next year. So I'm really excited for this episode. It's going to be a good chance for us to speak with people who are involved in US soccer at this level and involved in bringing a historic club back to the supporters. We'd also just like to give a massive shout out to Stephen Torres and Ansif for once again putting us in touch with Erik and David and making sure this episode happened, and the episode on North Jersey professional soccer as well. We entered into a partnership with Ansif at the beginning of the year, which is largely, it's not entirely formal, but we've been helping each other out with a lot of stuff, and it's been great so far. I think it's fair to say that the partnership has definitely worked, and we're really looking forward to working with Ansif in other areas moving forward this year, but also into next year as we continue to grow and Ansif continue their incredible work in charting the history and heritage of soccer within CONCACAF and beyond. Just before we kick things off properly, Erik, if you just want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself again, just for those who might have not tuned into the last episode you were on.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that, Rory. So I'm the CEO of the New York Cosmos. Through my history, I've worked in stadium management, stadium construction. Most recently, I've worked with the New York Red Bulls and eventually worked with the New York Cosmos in the 2010 era when we won 3 championships in 5 years. And we had great players like Raul and Marco Senna and Juan Arango, and then a lot of great local players. Carlos Mendez comes to mind. Worked in international football for several years and now back in New Jersey and revitalizing the Cosmos again.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic what your plans are for the Cosmos, and we're going to jump into all the reasons behind the revival a bit later on once we've been through the history. And here to help us with the history is Dr. David Kilpatrick, as I mentioned. David, if you just want to tell our listeners a little bit about you and your role within US soccer and soccer history, I suppose.
Well, since November of 2012, I've been the club historian for the New York Cosmos. Before that, I was engaged in a research project on kind of a larger project on New York soccer history. Been involved with the Society for American Soccer History for several years. I'm professor of English and program director of sport management at Mercer University in New York. And my research looks at the relationship between sport and the humanities, in particular soccer or association football, and its relationship to the humanities, in particular literature, history, philosophy. So, and as a kid, I was a card-carrying member of the Cosmos Kickers Youth Fan Club. And I used to go to school with my Pelé lunchbox, like so many kids of my generation. I was born in 1968. So,
do you still have that lunchbox?
If my camera was on, it would be over my right shoulder right now, Erik. Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah,
Nice.
I've still got that.
You need
it's
to
worth
send
a
us some photos.
worth a couple dollars, that thing.
After I'm long gone, my children will profit off that lunchbox, I'm sure. But yeah, so I started collecting Cosmos memorabilia back in. I think the first thing I ever collected was the official replica coin from Pelé's farewell match, October 1st, Cosmos against Santos. 1977, and really the Cosmos were for me were a portal to the rest of the world, cosmopolitanism and the global game and all that. So for me, it was all about my curiosity and my love for the club goes back to my childhood.
For sure. I mean, it's amazing the amount of, and your CV is absolutely incredible, Dave. I should say that first of all, in terms of the study and the research that you do. But one of the things that we kind of touch on sometimes in this podcast, but haven't really dived into, is this idea of memory, remembrance, and nostalgia, how nostalgia relates to heritage, and really kind of diving academically deep into that. And it's amazing because you can use the New York Cosmos as a case study for so many things. And one of those things is the amount of memories it evokes just by saying those three words, New York Cosmos. It brings back so much for so many people. And I suppose for someone of my generation, I was born in 1996, so the Cosmos weren't a club that was really on my radar until I got a bit older. But for some of my uncles, my cousins, the New York Cosmos, in a way, were the gateway to soccer in the US, and it was largely due to a number of these names that they attracted to them. It's just amazing how much nostalgia is wrapped up within the New York Cosmos, and to an extent other NASL and other clubs from the US from that era as well. It's absolutely incredible the amount that you can study by looking at this football club. And I think one of my favourite things about what Erik is doing is that it's opening a new chapter in the Cosmos history, which is just phenomenal.
Well, there's so much to unpack with that, right? And you're absolutely right for especially people of my generation and younger generations. There is a legend that's been built up around the club and was cultivated rather consciously as such. The people that founded the club, whether it was the founding general manager, Clive Toy, very much tapping into something mythic with the Cosmos name. I mean, it goes back to Diogenes in Athens, the citizen of the world. So global citizenship for the global game in the city where the United Nations is headquarters. It all just kind of aligns so beautifully. What they didn't know was that there was even a Cosmopolitan Association football club from the 1890s that had played a really important role in the early growth of the game. And because the word cosmopolitan is so long, the newspapers back then used to shorten it to Cosmos. So there's something about that name. But in the specific case of the Cosmos here, a lot of people, I think, almost mistakenly think of this case study as a Phoenix club, but it's not really that way in the way of, say, like a Clydebank or AFC Wimbledon. Some of these clubs that are more technically Phoenix clubs, where the philosopher of sport Stephen Mumford talks about a conspiracy of fans and often former players, things like that, kind of agreeing to latch on to the history. And that's the case with some of the Cascadia franchises in Major League Soccer, right? There's not necessarily a clear linkage. But here, this is a case where the Cosmos intellectual property rights were protected very carefully. And the Cosmos stayed a sporting entity under U.S. legal law from the time that first team operations first shut down in 1984. So there's absolute continuity, and it's got to manifest in the trophies around the office, or even the bags that carried the jerseys themselves. Some of the blazers that the players used to wear with the badge over the heart, right? You check in the pocket and there's phone numbers. So in a material culture kind of way, this club, there's something very real about this. And also the interruptions of play, if you will, speak so powerfully to the history of American soccer over the past 50 years in terms of why play has been interrupted for the Cosmos a couple times now, and how we're back now in the context in which we're able to compete moving forward with the USL. It's a really exciting time to be a Cosmos fan, but it's been a big challenge. But that mythical power that's associated with the club really, I think, is something that isn't at all limited to New Yorkers, right? Anywhere you go around the world, people will talk about what the Cosmos meant to them. So, huge crowds here, but they played 172 matches against internationals and in 45 different countries. They were America's international team, but they also were representing America all around the world. And so the Cosmos in many ways are quintessential New York sporting entity, but also quite fittingly, it's a global phenomenon too.
There's so much there that we can talk about. I'm really glad that you used terms like mythic and mythical, because these are huge concepts within heritage as well. And we've spoken before about how myth and folklore and storytelling plays its part in football. I'm always very cautious of, as someone who enjoys history, but is ultimately more of a heritage person. I'm always, conscious of sticking to the facts, but I think we'd all admit that if there wasn't some mythical element or mysticism to football, then it wouldn't be as enjoyable, because we've all been told stories by our grandparents, whoever it might be, that you're just like, come on, that can't be real. But that's part of enjoying football, and that's part of what it is. But I'd otherwise agree with you, David. I think it's a really exciting time to be a fan of soccer in the US. Obviously all these changes have come in recently, and we're going to talk about them a little bit more in depth soon. But in terms of the Cosmos, you mentioned there's been a lot of stopping and starting. There's been a lot of breaks in history, not just for the Cosmos, but for soccer in the US as well, more generally. And I think maybe for some people, if they decide to go and look at the history of soccer in the US, it can be a little bit confusing, maybe not entirely clear what's going on or what's happened. And there's a lot of, we could have separate podcasts for each of these leagues and each of these breaks that have happened. But I mean, I think you're right that it kind of speaks to the enduring nature of the Cosmos, that they've managed to survive most, if not all of them, and are still, they're still a continuous club today. Being very cautious not to use that term Phoenix Club, because as you mentioned, it wouldn't be fair to call them as such. The contexts are a little bit different, but that thread of continuity can be traced back to the 70s, which is incredibly rare, but again, speaks to the power of the Cosmos, if you want to put it that way.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked at speaking events, especially around the world. So when are the Cosmos getting into the MLS? And, it's understandable that people don't understand the kind of business model that's been in place since the World Cup was here in 1994, and why there's been this struggle to try to climb back up to match the achievements from my youth when the Cosmos had that real golden era. People don't understand so much of the structure of franchise scarcity and single entity and things like that, and the drive towards promotion and relegation here. I think so many people like to see it as a European sport model as opposed to a North American sport model, but the associativity inherent in the game since its founding in October 1863 at the Freemasons Tavern is all about competition and again, associativity, about my club plays your club, and let's see who's the best at the end of the day. We've got to work together. And that's not necessarily how things have worked here in the United States. But as Erik has said rather powerfully of late, we've got hope now. We've got hope that there's a serious reform coming to the institutions that govern the game here. We're really excited for what that means in terms of opportunities for Cosmos to rise to global prominence once more.
For sure. And obviously it's weird because, we could have a historic episode on the New York Cosmos, but, everyone, well, mostly everyone knows about the Cosmos. They know about the players that played for them, and, we could go back over it, but is that something that we really want to do when it's something that's been done to death? Everyone knows the history of the Cosmos, and this is what's going to be an exciting new chapter for them. But obviously, you mentioned there, and this is something that I'm quite keen to touch on, because I think the context of it is important, and it will also help dispel some of the weird behaviour and myths that have been surrounding this revival of the Cosmos, particularly surrounding the name and legal rights, etc. There's been a lot of issues and disputes around the brand and the name, but those aren't a problem anymore. But could you guys just provide a little bit of context as to what those problems were and some of the challenges that you've actually faced in reviving the Cosmos because of those?
Yeah, so look, a lot of what David has said is very relevant to this question, and that is the continuity of the Cosmos has been clearly defined from day one, including the long window between the collapse of the NASL and ultimately revitalization of the NASL, the second iteration of it in 2009 or so. I don't have the recollection of dates that David does, so there'll be a lot of hemming and hawing from me. But yeah, whenever the NASL came back, Cosmos joined that league. That gap in between, Pepe Pinton fought hard and spent a lot of his money to maintain the continuity of the club. That includes protecting the trademarks, and that is very expensive. You spend a lot of money on lawyers, and he did that with a vision of there being a time in the United States where the Cosmos could get back to the highest level. The NASL 2.0, if you want to call it that, was meant to be the vehicle to do that. There are a number of reasons why that did not work out. Maybe we'll get into those later. But Rocco Camiso owned the club when the NASL folded, and he has done the same thing, has maintained the trademarks, sold jerseys all over the world, camps and clinics were run, and not the least of which was maintaining the club and the effort to file an antitrust claim against U.S. Soccer and MLS, spending almost a decade fighting that fight. That case is still ongoing. So all of that activity was in mind of when can we get the team back on the field, and we're doing that now. The great thing about Rocco was when he saw what we were doing in North Jersey and recognized that it aligned with his vision when he bought the club, in 2017. His vision was very much in line with what we're doing now. So the goal always was to get the team back on the field, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. I mean, obviously, when we done the North Jersey Professional Soccer podcast, you told us what your aims and ambitions were for the club, and we'll get on to that. These things can't be easy, and there have been a lot of, kind of people saying that this is illegal and that, these naming rights aren't proper and all this kind of a nonsense. But it's kind of weird that people are doing that when the legacy of the club is so strong and when the new ambitions for it are there. There's been a lot of comparisons between clubs reviving the names of former football teams and cash grab operations, which isn't the case here either. It's completely bizarre. And it's very, very strange that people are kind of looking at the new Cosmos as being one of those clubs when, as you've said, there is that thread of continuity, and it's the thread of continuity that gives the club its authenticity, I think. Something that's really important and something that is actually really underrated when it comes to, talking about the authenticity of football clubs.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is really one person, not people.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
credit, I can't really go into it. We have attorneys managing it. But I will point back to the continuity and ownership of the club is clear. And if you're talking about abandonment of marks of any corporation, there's a very clear set of tests that someone claiming that would have to successfully defend in court. And we're going to, unfortunately, see ourselves in court someday. But the continuity is very clear. There is no argument on abandonment. The whole thing is really, by my view, a waste of time and money. But, we have to defend ourselves, and we will. And we're not going to cow to a PR campaign with not a lot of validity to it. So we'll just deal with it as we will and send a message to the rest of the world. And that also gives us an opportunity to talk about what we're doing now, which is a lot of good in the community. And I believe addressing some of the things that we need to do better in American soccer.
100%. It's good to have that cleared up, though. And David, for you, in terms of the continuity, how important is it that a club was actually taking the field again under the Cosmos name and in the Cosmos colours, continuing that rich heritage that the club has? I know it's not been a huge amount of time since there was last a Cosmos team on a football field playing football, but obviously this is quite a significant development, and it's going to be a significant change for the community in US soccer, which can only lead to positive things.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's quite literally a dream come true, and that was the case back in 2013. I mean, for years and years and years, since the mid 80s, I had recurring dreams. Sometimes the dream would be, I got to get to the stadium and see the Cosmos. Sometimes, I don't know if it's I'd eaten a little pizza or had a little too much beer or whatever. Sometimes the dream was I had to get to the stadium to play for the Cosmos, But that dream had happened years and years and years. And then in 2013, it actually happened. It happened. They came back. And, I'd been to games with my father and my grandfather to see the Cosmos. Then I was able to go with my wife and my children and carry it on to the next generation. And it keeps the lore alive. And going to the games, becoming friends with those great players from the past, whether it's, Joseph Jelinek, who scored the winning goal in the 1972, our first championship game, or sitting down and having lunch with Vladislav Bogusevic, the great midfielder, or getting to know any of these amazing people. Shep Messing, the legendary goalkeeper. These are people that I'm really blessed now to call friends. Right, Ricky Davis. These are people who posters on my wall, and the team on the field means that there's a better chance to honor the legacy of great players like that. And when the team's not on the field, the club doesn't have the opportunity to really celebrate that legacy. To me, the 3 A's of American soccer are amnesia, antagonism, and apologetics, right? We forget so much about our past. We're either fighting amongst ourselves or against other sports. Then we're always making excuses for why we don't achieve what we should here. 3 more championships being won under Erik's leadership, it was, again, we talk about mythical. To me, a myth is a sacred story. And to me, the sacred is about meaning. And so it really, it's not an exaggeration for me to say that my life is feeling more meaningful again, knowing that the Cosmos are going to be back out on the pitch next year.
Yeah, and this is what football does for people, though, and you shouldn't really go under the radar that, this week at the time of recording, there's obviously all the stuff about Morecambe FC running out of funds. Basically, staff are working for free at this point to keep the stadium open and the lights on. But, I mean, without knowing too much about, the deals going on behind the scenes, it would seem, given what we know so far, that it's very likely that the club will be expelled from the National League on August 20th at the time of recording, which is August 5th. But we've seen the impact that Morecambe potentially falling out of existence has actually had on the community and the people. And it's something that we've been speaking about an awful lot recently, that when a football club goes defunct or stops playing, you're not just losing a football team, you're also taking away a part of the community. These are places where shared memories and shared experiences are created, where people can, point to their sometimes entire family history, their ancestry. They can stand on the same places in the terracing that their grandparents or great-grandparents stood. So you're losing a lot of these things that tie people to their place, that tie people to their communities, and that tie people to their memories. So when a football club comes back, it actually has this incredibly empowering effect. Because, we always speak about what happens when a football club leaves us, but then when a football club comes back, a lot of people are like, well, they're having to start from the bottom again. They're starting from the ground up. It's going to be difficult for them. But you see how much people actually rally around these clubs. Look at Hereford, who are a great example of exactly that. People rally around football clubs that have been lost because they're waiting for them to come back. And it's been the same with the case with yourself and so many other people. People have been waiting for the Cosmos to come back. And now that they are back, they have something that they can rally around again. Because, as I said on an episode, I think it was our Inverness Thistle episode a couple of weeks ago, when you lose your football club, you can maybe go and watch other football teams play, but they'll never be your club. It will never replicate the feeling of you watching and supporting your club. And then when you get the club back, you have that feeling back again. It makes complete sense,
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I would say that's a phenomenon that is fortunately relatively rare, almost anomalous there in the UK, right? Thoughts and prayers for the Morecambe supporters, of course, and I don't mean it with any sarcasm whatsoever. I mean, in terms of I absolutely understand what they're going through. But as a North American sport fan, that's not an uncommon experience. I spent much of my youth in Memphis, Tennessee, and I saw a revolving door of sport franchises come through the city there that would either rebrand or relocate or just shut down. The most famous example probably in American sport is when the Giants and the Dodgers left New York for the West Coast to go out to San Francisco and Los Angeles, respectively. There's a lot of romanticism about the Dodgers, not as much as about the Giants, who were really the biggest team for the longest time here. Still got the New York Football Giants, and the other day there was some kind of meetup between the New York Football Giants and the San Francisco Giants to kind of celebrate that legacy. But again, with the amnesia of American soccer, we forget all about the New York Soccer Giants, who were a huge team in the 1920s, one of the best teams in the world.
Absolutely.
And so when you've got that connection, when you've got those friends, and that's the thing, when the announcement was made, you said about it not being such a well-kept secret by the time it got to the press conference, and biting my lip for weeks was really difficult, Erik. It was really tough. But, seeing so many...
By the way, Rory, I think I made him cry.
Yeah.
I managed to keep it quiet for a very long time. Some people knew about it, but we kept it quiet, and David was in the dark. And a few weeks prior to it becoming public, I let him know, and I do think he shed a tear. We weren't in the same room, but I could hear it in his voice.
Well, what's crazy about that is that it's actually linked to this podcast. In the podcast that you did with my good friend Tom McCabe, right, is that I knew that Rocco wanted this to happen. I knew that Mediacom saw the project in North Jersey. And I knew that back, shortly after the court case, after the jury rendered its verdict, I spoke in London. And, I'd been in a lot of touch with Mediacom, looking at the court transcripts and things like that. And, it was clear from MediaCom the week I got back from London, hey, you see what Erik's got going on there in North Jersey? Have you seen that stadium? Wouldn't this be great for the Cosmos? I'm like, yes, so yeah, of course. So I'm like, yeah. So my, again, the questions I was facing at Birkbeck University of London when I gave a talk about the current state of American soccer, the questions were, when are the Cosmos coming back to field a team again, right? And in the days after the trial, I was pretty low. I was pretty down. I was pretty frustrated by what I saw in terms of what was allowed to be said in court and things like that. And so then, I got my hopes. So then I heard the podcast, and I'm thinking, hey, wait a second now. Are they going to go with Patterson True Blues or something? So I'm listening to this podcast, the Football Heritage podcast, driving down the New York State Thruway with my father, who, again, I'd been to Cosmos games with as a kid, right? And he's saying, it would be nice if they could be the Cosmos. Wouldn't that be great if that was just the Cosmos? I'm like, well, I know that Rocco wants that. And Erik, it was like 10, 15 minutes after my father and I listened to that podcast that you called me. So yeah, I wept. Absolutely.
That's absolutely incredible. What a story. But again, it just speaks to the power of what you guys are doing to be able to bring this back. And I can imagine that a number of other people would have probably wept as well, because, like you say, David, how many other people are there going to be who still have their Pele lunchbox? Do you know what I mean? There's going to be so many kids who are a lot older now, who want to see the Cosmos back, who've got them back, and ultimately this is what football's all about as well. And of course, as we mentioned on the North Jersey Professional Soccer podcast, a lot of this really came about because of the new USL rules and the implementation of what is going to be promotion and relegation, which is really exciting and is going to change the landscape of soccer within the US.
Yeah, no doubt. And actually, there are several things that have come together, confluence of just really essential business ideas coming together at the same time. The first is promotion relegation, as you mentioned. So not an accident that Cosmos are coming back into the USL at this time. Getting the stadium renovated. So everything that Roy and David that you've talked about with the importance of clubs in the community, you could say the same about a stadium, and the people in North Jersey and Patterson have lived it for 25 years even longer, because the stadium was falling apart before it was condemned. They lost that piece of their history. They lost that importance in the community. The story behind Larry Doby seeing legends play for the New York Black Yankees in Hinchliffe Stadium in his backyard basically gave him that inspiration, that aspiration to play professional sports. And he gets discovered on the field at Hinchliffe Stadium and ends up becoming the second African American to play in Major League Baseball. That power is what you guys were just talking about. And this community did not have it for 3 decades longer. It is a very key part of what we're doing in bringing the Cosmos back, bringing that into the community at the stadium, and then using the power of the Cosmos and the power of the stadium to do even more outside of soccer. So we believe in this to our core, that these types of things are essential and can drive a community forward. And I do think it's missing in a lot of ways with sport across the globe. It's becoming too corporate, too disconnected. I say becoming. It's been too corporate, too disconnected from its roots for a long time. And we see that for us as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do all the good we want to do in the community, and it's an opportunity to build a business that supports the community that we can keep reinvesting in.
Sustainable as well. I love what you've said there, the power of the Cosmos and the power of the stadium. It's marrying this intangible thing and the idea of the Cosmos, the colour, the badge, everything that stands for, with a tangible thing, which is the stadium, this focal point of the community in Patterson, New Jersey. It's the perfect way to go about it. We've saw, many times clubs tried to revive old names and unfortunately they don't last very long, but in my opinion, this is the proper and right way to go about it, is understanding what those colours, what those badges and what those places mean to people, and using it in a way that's beneficial to them and the club and the community as well. So, in terms of the decision to revive the Cosmos, has this been something that you've had in your mind for a long time, Erik, or is it something that you kind of fell into? Tell us a story about your decision to revive the Cosmos and how you became involved?
It's actually both. It's sort of a combination of those two things. So
Nice.
I was hired to consult and work on the restoration of the stadium. And my partner on this, Baye Adolfo Wilson, who saved the stadium, he saw the future of the stadium, the most successful events very likely being professional soccer. And we set about to revitalize the stadium in a way that we could accomplish that. So, for example, you see games in the United States and they have American football lines on the field, or they have lacrosse lines or logos. And it makes it very, very hard to watch a match. It makes it hard for the players to play. So we made decisions not to do that 4 or 5 years ago. And yes, it was in the back of my mind that maybe at some point the Cosmos could call this stadium home. But even 4 years ago, it was a different landscape than it is now. Back to the promotion and relegation conversation, the antitrust lawsuit is still pending, and things are a bit different there. But a lot of things have changed with soccer in America. The NASL lawsuit was not the only lawsuit. The women's national team fighting for their fair share, which was a very successful campaign on their part. Solidarity payments, training compensation. So much has been going on in the United States, and the changing of the relationship between U.S. soccer and MLS. All these things have been coming together over the last few years that made this a possibility. I'll be honest that when I came back to the States and we were going full speed ahead at this, I was a little leery of the Cosmos idea because of the expectations and knowing that what we need to do in Patterson is a bit different. We need to really develop our own talent. That has to be the top priority. That's not to say that we're not going to sign veteran, accomplished players and at some point in our near future that we won't have superstars again. But our priority right now has to be about the community. And I was a little concerned about what the Cosmos expectations would put on us. But we just kept talking about it. And, for the folks at MediaCom, they saw the vision and we were able to make a deal that made sense for everybody. And no doubt it was the right decision because the platform that we have now to do the good we want to do is much greater. So it's been the last month since the announcement, it's been a whirlwind, a lot of very positive stories, and the community has really responded, and the potential is there to do great things.
I'd 100% agree with you. I think the potential to do great things certainly is there, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone, for the most part, who isn't backing the new Cosmos in their mission to do what they do. And one of the best things about it is that you've really taken this heritage and this history from the Cosmos, but stamped your own identity on it as well, which I think is important. So much of heritage, and kind of rightly so, is perceived as being the old and the former because those are the roots and those are the origins. But heritage can also be modern. It can also be new. It can also be the things that we don't have yet but are planning to have. Ultimately, heritage is something that isn't just confined to the past. And given something your own identity ultimately contributes to the heritage of the thing in the past as well as the present, and will do so in the future. That's just how it works. I mean, how important was it for you guys that the heritage of the Cosmos was obviously used and obviously evoked in this revival, but not to the extent where it's just a recreation of the past club, but something that's new and modern and will, bring people in from different generations and different backgrounds?
Yeah, I think projects like this could be done in ways that are exploitative and just crass commercializations where you're just trying to exploit a legacy and mine it in a real short-term vision and move on. My involvement with the club in a formal way since sitting down with Erik on Green Street in Soho back in 2012. I've been inspired by the real authentic relationship to the club's legacy and a genuine sense of carrying it forward to the future and maximizing it. As Erik was saying, there's more good that can be done at Hinchliffe Stadium because of the power of the Cosmos. I will say, a couple moments ago, you said you'd be hard pressed to find people who aren't backing us. Au contraire, there are people that want Cosmos to fail. There are people that don't want to see the kind of systemic change that we're calling for, the kind of reform that we're looking for. And again, I think it needs to be said, the vision of Rocco Commisso, first of all, to save this club when it was really almost on its deathbed. And there wouldn't have been the continuity if the club did fold when Rocco bought the club. But not only did he keep it going, he didn't just decide to keep it on a shelf. No, he's invested a tremendous amount of money in trying to bring the systemic form he saw the Cosmos needed to thrive. Not for the sake of the Cosmos, but for the good of soccer in America, which we think is for the good of soccer for the world, which we think is good for the world. And it's kind of really poetically beautiful, I dare say, that this is happening in Paterson of all places, where, William Carlos Williams' remarkable modernist masterpiece is all about that relationship between the particular local and the global, right? Something really powerful about that alignment now. So again, it's not a matter of like, oh, here's the brand. Back in the office, we used to have that cup, right? You couldn't use the B word. Remember, Eric? And there weren't too many dollars that went into that thing because nobody used it. We're a club. We're a real club, and really being sincere about that, and treating the not only the former players or the former front office staff, but the former fans, and bringing them aboard. And that's been kind of responded to with so many of the rabid fans that came on board from 2013 on, being in the room with them, and I was sitting next to Giovanni Severisi. I just hugged Shep Messing, but there were a handful of real hardcore fans that somehow got into the room for the announcement, and the hugs, the embraces. That some of us haven't seen each other in 5 years. I feel like I'm coming out of hibernation myself. But it's the meaningfulness of the Cosmos and the impact that it can make on Paterson and North Jersey and the New York metropolitan area, and then globally. There's a really clear vision here. And there's a very finely articulated mission that Erik has laid out, that everyone understands very clearly, that makes this really different from some other kind of just slap on the brand and go with it type nostalgia trip.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm quite interested to tap into this this idea of location. We mentioned it on the North Jersey Professional Soccer podcast. Obviously, the Cosmos are going to be playing out of Hinchliffe Stadium, historic Hinchliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey. Obviously, a lot of people have said, well, how can they be the New York Cosmos if they're not in New York, and all this kind of stuff. But I think those are people who aren't really understanding the context of New York and New Jersey and the wider New York metropolitan area, or otherwise they're just doing it to troll and have a cheap dig. But Hinchliffe is important to the wider New York metropolitan area, and in a way this is tying into the New York Cosmos identity of being a universal club by having them play in New Jersey. And as you've both mentioned, this is actually going to do a huge amount for a community which has struggled in recent years, but which also has a really, really rich heritage within soccer.
Yeah, as far as the name goes, first of all, anybody in New York, it's kind of an old story, right? New York Giants don't play in New York, blah, blah, blah. And people are going to make those jokes. So the first thing I would say is we weren't going to change the name New York Cosmos. That's what resonates with everyone around the world. Second thing is that it is part of Cosmos history to play in New Jersey. Actually, the peak of the Cosmos, 77, 78, was when they moved from New York to play at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. The word New York came out of the crest, and just Cosmos was there. And that's the crest that we used to model this version of the crest off of the 77 crest. And, there's subtle changes, but it's in recognition of that history. This is part of the club. And as David alluded to earlier, it's part of American soccer and the roller coaster ride that has been American soccer. And so all of that makes perfect sense. It also makes perfect sense with what we're trying to do as a club. Our goal is to have as many members as possible. And I think many of them are not going to like soccer. They're going to be a member of our club for another reason, a different sport, a different activity, art, culture, whatever it might be. And the whole idea is to not only have that huge membership base, but that they're rallying around the word Cosmos, that the club becomes part of their identity. And then together we have the power to make change in the community throughout North Jersey. So that's ultimately what changed my mind about which way was the right way to go. We weren't going to stay with North Jersey Pro Soccer. We were going to come up with something else. But the Cosmos, as I said earlier, gives us the power to have that influence and have that change. I do want to say something sort of off topic a little bit. David was just mentioning bringing people back. It is so hard to invite everybody you'd like to invite to an event like we had for the press conference. There are a lot of players that we still need to track down, a lot of former staff, but we're trying to bring the family back together and to communicate effectively and be a good steward of the club. It's not easy, but it was great to see the people we were able to bring back. Similar to the timing of letting David know what was happening, I let some of the supporter groups know from the 2010s. So those folks were able to show up and they gave the event the life that it needs, just like they give, the 90 minutes, the life that and the energy that it's required. And when I finish here, heading over to the stadium to meet with them and talk about what our plans are going to be moving forward with, sort of getting them set up in Hinchliffe Stadium. So all of that, I bring all of that up just to say that it is a club and we need the people to feel connected to it. And we work hard every day to do our best to bring that club atmosphere to the organization.
Absolutely love that. It's bringing back the old Cosmos family. It's a great way of putting it, but also bringing new people into it as well, which is really important. Obviously, all doing it through a very, very strong heritage. And, we can talk about heritage and marketing and loads of other things. But we've already spoken about those on this show. And it's quite interesting that you're kind of going down the model of being more of a sports club as opposed to specifically a football club. It's not something that we see a lot of here in the UK. It's probably more prominent in Europe. Is it something that soccer clubs in America have started moving more towards, or is this going to be something that's more of a first for club soccer in the US?
I think it's a first. There may be somebody out in this somewhere else doing a similar idea. This goes back to my point of the confluence of a lot of good things coming together at the right time. I think back to the commercialization and the loss of the soul of sporting organizations. This is in direct opposition to that. Quite frankly, we see it as a business opportunity that in the long term, we're going to build a far more sustainable organization if we're more inclusive, more welcoming, and we're doing more in the community that isn't directly related to soccer. There's also a lot of innovation in technology that will help support this concept that makes it a unique moment in time. Much of that innovation is very common in Europe, but is not common here in the United States. So we're bringing all these different ideas together, ideas that we know work in the rest of the world, to an environment that we see as the perfect environment to succeed with these ideas. For example, there's cities in the United States that I wouldn't recommend doing what we're doing. It just wouldn't make sense. For the commercial opportunity, the type of community it is, everything we're doing makes perfect sense for where we are. And without the stadium, without Hinchliffe Stadium being saved, none of it would be possible. So all of these things are coming together in the right way. And this vision of building a club, while we talked about it in 2012, 13, 14, we didn't necessarily have the tools to execute it. We brought the ethos to the people, but it wasn't easy for us to actually do the work that you would with a club. So we can do that now. And the stadium is a big part of allowing us to do that. And I'm really excited to see where it's going to go. This is a model, a business plan driven on sustainable, consistent growth. We're not trying to change the world overnight. We're trying to be successful one day at a time. And when we look back at where we were 5 years prior, we'll see that growth and we'll see how it's worked across all the different activities that we're doing at the stadium and with our club.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on.
Just to back that up too, Eric, I don't know if you remember when we first sat down in your office in 2012. I had two questions, right? The first one was, are there any aspirations for MLS? And you said no. And I think my second question was, well, what about a women's team? And you said, yes, absolutely, we want to do that. But the conditions weren't right for it. So in terms of being a multi-sport club, or even having a women's team, now there's talk about a Cosmos women's team in the near future as well, right? It's extremely exciting. So Cosmos fans are really energized about that prospect. So, in the past 12 months, I've spent time visiting FC Barcelona and Benfica. These are two multi-sport clubs where the Association Football Club is kind of the drives the operations. The men's professional football club drives operations, but there's so many other sporting entities, whether it's the women's teams or team handball or basketball or whatever it may be at these multi-sport clubs, and having that kind of pied à terre, that footprint, that home of Hinchliffe and Patterson makes so much of this so much more possible, as well as the other institutional reforms that have happened of late.
Yeah, David, thank you for bringing up the women. Because the men are coming first, we tend to talk more about men's football, but there's more than talk about bringing women's professional football to the Cosmos. That's going to happen within the next few years. Right now, it's looking like 2028. Still to be determined, but that is a key part of our identity. It will grow quickly once we get started. We're more focused on the men just because we've got to play a game here in a few months. So we're hyper focused on that. But yeah, it's I think the opportunity around the women's team might be even greater. And I think it's important to soccer in America that we do it well, because there are hundreds and hundreds of young women leaving university that are good enough to play professionally. And we have to create the jobs for them so they have that opportunity. And that's what we're trying to do. And I know that's what USL Super League is trying to do. So just to reiterate that it's a really important part of our mission.
Deeds, not words, I suppose, is what comes to mind. You need to be able to back up what you're doing with these actions, and I think you've already done that. I think moving into Hinchliffe is a massive part of that. I think announcing that there's going to be a women's team before long is a massive part of that as well. And this next question maybe flies in the face of the sustainable model, but if the New York Cosmos 1970 had Pelé, who are the New York Cosmos 2025 going to have, or who would you guys like to see as being the standout player, if you want to say that, or the star player that joins the Cosmos, if you were able to decide that, of course?
Okay, so this is a good one. And it's always fun to have these conversations, and it gives me a chance to down a trope that's out there all the time in retirement league. That bothers me. I don't think that makes sense. I think if you're running any sporting organization, but let's talk about soccer since we're talking about soccer.
For sure.
If you can bring a player in that's going to help you win games, that's all that matters. And there are a lot of veteran players that sign for the last 2 years of their career at an organization that they help take to a different level, win a championship. And if you look at the average amount of time a player plays at a particular club, we romanticize the guys that play at a club for 15 years, 20 years, and deservedly so. But the vast majority are at clubs for a short amount of time. So to bring in a veteran that is going to help you win games, that's all that matters to me. And so the retirement league stuff always annoys me a little bit, but there's a long way of saying if I could sign someone right now to be the personification of what the club is and will be, it would be Luka Modric.
Oh, that's a great choice.
He is just a consummate team player. The fact that he's a person of the world, he's cosmopolitan in his upbringing and his career. I think for all of that, and that's obviously keeping it realistic. I'm not going to say Yamal, obviously no brainer. But if you own a professional soccer team in the United States and you had the chance to sign someone that you actually could afford, for me, it would be Luka Modric.
It's a good decision. I mean, I more had in mind a small Argentine playing in Miami at the moment, but that's just me. Again, you maybe need to keep it realistic. What about yourself, David?
Oh gosh, that's hard to say. One of the great things about the Cosmos heritage is, you've got Pelé, you've got Quinalha, you've got Carlos Alberto, you've got Franz Beckenbauer, even Johan Cruyff and Socrates wore the shirt for a couple of friendlies. But so many of the greatest players of that generation wore the badge. But I'm really just excited about seeing some of the younger talent, the other players that we cherish, like Bobby Smith, Werner Roth, Ricky Davis, the greatest American players of that generation. And then, we've had Carlos Mendez, Danny Zatella, the more recent local legends that have added to the Cosmos lore. I'm just really excited to see what local talent we're going to bring to the side, whether that's some veteran leadership that might be local or the kids that are going to be getting the opportunities. That's really what I'm focused on right now, rather than anybody out there who may want to move to New York for the last couple of years of their contract. I mean, that would be cool and everything, but I'm much, much more excited about the possibilities for local talent wearing the badge.
I think that's really important as well, though, and it ties in with what your vision is for the new Cosmos. Like, let's not forget that the idea is to bring through local talent, is to inspire new generations of supporters and players alike. And at the end of the day, you're trying to be sustainable. And while, like you said, we would love Luka Modric, we would love all these great players, these journeymen to come in and in a way continue the heritage of the Cosmos and that heritage that they had of bringing superstars to their ranks. But you want to be sustainable and you want to do it in a way that's new, that's fresh, that's different, and that will make sure the club has a future within the next 20, 30, 50, however many years. And, bringing through local talent and implanting yourself as a presence within the community and an identity within the community is, in my opinion, far more important than bringing in, an overpaid veteran who's going to win you games,
Yeah, I mean, Alexis Sanchez, maybe, if you really push me.
Decent choice, to be fair.
There's a really strong Chilean community in Patterson. So, to me, there's a dynamic player that could still make an impact and really connect with the local community. But as I say, I really want to see the local kids come up. That's what I'm most excited for.
Yeah, I can understand that. Just before we finish things up, guys, the last thing that I really wanted to ask you is that now that the cat's out of the bag, now that everyone knows the New York Cosmos are returning and they're returning to the field next year, what is the immediate plans in the short term? I can imagine that things are very, very busy for the club, but there's been a whole bunch of celebration and media attention around this, and understandably so. So what does the rest of the year look like for you guys in terms of the Cosmos, and what are things looking like in 2026? Because this is a really, really exciting time for soccer, not just in America, but around the world.
Yeah, so we have a lot to do in a short amount of time. We should be finalizing our head coach here soon, and that'll be just in time to get into a lot of the tryouts that we're going to start having. We're going to start with invitation-only tryouts. Eventually, we'll have open to the public tryouts as well. We're looking for that player or players that David was just referring to. The diamond in the rough in North Jersey that just hasn't had a chance to be seen because of pay to play, and that kid can't afford to be part of that system. So that's coming up, the tryouts. From a commercial point of view, I alluded to earlier the membership program. We're going to be launching that over the next couple months. And that's absolutely critical to our success, is opening ourselves up to as many members as possible, telling them what we're about, how we're going to be different, and getting them into our organization. All of that we will start with for free. So you can join, become a member, learn about the club and what we're doing. And ultimately, it's converting them into ticket buyers for the soccer team. But we expect that that's not going to be easy. New York is a don't tell me, show me area, as you said earlier, Rory. More than anywhere else in the United States, words are cheap here. It's actions that matter, and it's in doing one thing isn't going to be enough. It's doing the right thing over and over and over again that's really going to matter. And so the rest of this year into next year for our staff is that message, is out in the community, doing things the right way, doing it genuinely, meeting folks, and hopefully converting them into being members. And then we know over time that that's going to work, that we will have packed stadiums, and that success will then help us do even more with different sports and activities in the community.
That's fantastic. And what about yourself, David? Obviously, as one of the leading historians on the Cosmos and the Cosmos historian, what's your involvement going to be over the next few months? I'd imagine that you're probably a bit more involved in, how do you connect people to the club using the history and the heritage side of things? So I could probably sit and pick your brains about this for a long time, but if you could briefly tell me and our listeners what the Cosmos looks like for you over the next few months.
Well, definitely in terms of my own marching orders, I suppose, I'm trying to work as hard as I can to rebuild the alumni database, just to make sure that everybody's connected and no one feels excluded, right? We want everybody that's ever worn the badge and anybody that's ever worked for the club, anybody that's ever been a fan of the club to reconnect and trying to facilitate that. So whether it's, updating phone numbers, email addresses of players from back in the 70s and 80s or in the 2010s, to kind of update all that and grow that, and trying to connect with local leaders in the arts community, arts and humanities community around Paterson. Those are a couple of my ambitions. And of course, trying to make sure that the story that we're telling as we move forward, inspires the new fan base and taps into the hopes and expectations of the existing fan base. And it's just as the crow flies, just a few miles away from Giant Stadium when that great Cosmos Country phenomenon happened. And, while we were playing over at Hofstra, and there was a nice historical connection to there, even though it was a temporary measure, we were playing out at Coney Island. There were a lot of fans over on the other side of the Hudson that had a really hard time. So, reconnecting with a lot of those fans that still have the Cosmos in their heart is really what I'm trying to make sure that we're ready for. But as we look to welcome the world, and it was interesting that this press conference was, in the last few days of the Club World Cup. My dreams for this club continue to be to see the Cosmos as the champions of the Club World Cup someday. For us to be officially recognized as the greatest team on the planet. That's what I hope to see in my lifetime, or at least in my children's lifetime. And so anything I can do to help that effort in the short term, that's the long-term goal.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly behind the Cosmos. I mean, being able to speak with you guys, over the course of the Cosmos coming back, even though we didn't know about it, has been amazing. It's been great to hear from, the mouths of the people who are actually making it happen as well, what the plans are and how you are planning to put those plans into place. I think that's quite important as well. Transparency, authenticity, and, the heritage. Those are the important things for me that make a football club successful and help them successfully connect with their supporters. Is there anything else that you guys really want to add just before we finish up for today? We've covered quite a lot of ground in the hour and a bit we've been speaking.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One is that we're going to keep David quite busy because we're going to have a Cosmos Museum at Hinchliffe Stadium.
I'm delighted to hear that.
And that gives us an opportunity to tell the stories that we've just been talking about. Clive Toy was mentioned earlier, the Erdogan brothers. They had a vision for this club at a time that no one else had been doing things that way. Really the first Galacticos football club in the world. And the museum will give us a chance to tell that story, give us a chance to talk about the cosmopolitan origination and how it started neighborhood by neighborhood and culture by culture within the New York metropolitan area. And that now informs us in what we're doing here in North Jersey. So the museum's absolutely critical. And like I said, we'll keep David very busy helping us curate that. One other thing that we haven't really had a chance to talk about, and maybe we did the first podcast, but the history of Hinchliffe Stadium and being home to Negro League baseball is very important for the community. And it's a National Historic Landmark. But comparing that to soccer, and we need to do more research here. I don't want to be so definitive about it, but I'm fairly certain that soccer in the United States was never segregated, that wherever you were from, whatever the color of your skin, whatever your religion, you could play soccer on any team, and you did, including in New York, where the New York Black Yankees had to play at Hinchliffe Stadium. There were soccer teams, and they played against each other, and their rosters were often very diverse. There was really never segregation. So to be in that stadium and have a museum that honors Negro League baseball next to a museum that's honoring the Cosmopolitans, I think is a really powerful story that I'm looking forward to telling in a really effective way. So excited for the future, 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I think a museum's crucial. Museums and the implication museums within Scottish football is something that I spoke about in my dissertation when I was doing my Masters in Heritage. So there's only one or two football clubs in Scotland that actually have accessible museums that are free at the point of use. One of them's Hearts. And I mean, it's been 4 years. I don't think there's another one yet. Most of them are behind paywalls. Most of them are part of stadium tours, and they're not really museums. So having museums that people can actually go to see the history of their football clubs is massively important. It's something that I think should become more of a thing in Scottish football. And, you know, we've got a club in tier 6 or tier 7, or non-league, who have a museum. They're a local football club, but they've done it for the people that support them, which is within their community. I think it's a massively important thing for people to be able to see and experience their heritage up close.
That Hearts Museum, I've visited that, and it's a wonderful space.
100% is.
And I'm really proud to say that, you know, that Cosmos have a prominent part to play in that, right? That Cosmos are a part of the display. Hearts were the first international team that we ever played. Yeah, I'm really glad to say that I've been to that stadium museum, and you know, we talked about a museum at a stadium again back in 2012. Some of the things that we dreamt about, we can actually achieve them now. So yeah, I mean, you know, in terms of, it's funny, this morning in the shower, I was literally thinking about a couple particular objects that I was gonna be.
Okay.
I want. Thinking of a jersey that I say, oh, this, and then we could write this with it. So, yeah, you know, these are the kind of things that I sit around fantasizing about.
Objects in the shower.
Yeah, and
nice.
So, yeah, making those dreams a reality at Hinchliffe in Patterson. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting, and you know, I think we're only about maybe 6 or 7 months off the Cosmos returning to the field of play, which is incredibly exciting now. 2026 is going to be a huge year for soccer in the US, and especially in Patterson, New Jersey, and the wider New York metropolitan area as well. But thank you very much both for coming on and spending your time to speak with us about the new Cosmos and your plans for implementing them and your roles and bringing them about. This has been a really good episode, and I hope all of our listeners have enjoyed listening to what is going to be another fantastic chapter within the Cosmos history, and something that's really going to inspire and benefit the community around it as well. Of course, thank you very much to all of our listeners once again for tuning in. If there's anything that you want us to cover, please email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk or DM us on X. That's @_footyheritage. That's us for this week. Erik, say goodbye.
Rory, thank you. Appreciate it.
David, say goodbye.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Rory. It's been really fun chat.
Yeah, this has been a great chat. Thank you both again for coming on. It's goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.